Hey everybody, it's Pete from MyJewelryBunch.com. Today what I want to do is spend a little time discussing one of the long-awaited features to Blender that, for those of us who have been using Blender for years and years and years, have been dying to get. And that's a working Blender asset library system where we can add objects to a library file and then import those into new projects as we're working with them. So I'm going to go over everything you need to know about it today and how to use it, and let's get started. And of course, while you're here, check out my channel. There you're going to find a whole lot of playlists and videos covering clock repair, watch repair, jewelry design, jewelry repair, and other things. 3D printing, getting ready for casting, things like that. So if you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you like this video, by the time you watch it, hit the like button because it does help my channel grow. Thanks a lot, and let's get started. Okay, so when you open up Blender, you're going to get the splash screen here. You're going to get your new Blender file. However, you have your default Blender settings set up. For instance, this is how I have mine. So all the add-ons that I use are over here on the End tab. I do use quite a few of the add-ons, both paid and free add-ons for my modeling purposes. So just keep that in mind. Your screen may not look exactly like mine, but we're not going to cover any add-ons today. We're only going to be covering basically how to use the library system. To do this is very simple. What we're going to do is actually create a couple of Blender files and a folder system for our libraries or our Blender asset library files so that we can go back and use those Blender files for specific things. It's not complicated. It is a little involved to get set up, but once you have it set up, it's very easy to work with. And there are a couple of things that you're going to have to remember when using the asset library system. When you create a library file, which is basically a Blender file, and you save it in your libraries folder and you link it to the library section, when you're working with a new project, you cannot add objects from the new project you're working on into your library. The only way to add objects into your existing libraries will be to actually open up those library files, either create or add objects to that particular file, and then save it. And we're going to cover all that today. So what I have basically is a brand new Blender file. There's no file name up here at the top, so we know it's a brand new file. And what I'm going to do is basically save this blank project as a new Blender library file. And to do this, I'm going to show you how I would create categories on my system. And it's basically using your file structure, whether it's on a PC or a Mac. I just happen to be using an Apple today to do this, but if it's the same working with a Macintosh or a PC, just different keys if you use shortcuts. So let's talk about that. I am actually going to go to the File menu, come down to Save As. And what I want to do is I want to create this particular, or create a new blank project to become one of my libraries. And here you can see I have Untitled Blender right here, or Untitled.blend. I'm actually going to put this on a spare hard drive called SSD Small, because it's just one of the hard drives I had. I'm going to create a new folder on my hard drive. I'm going to call this Blender Asset Library, and I am going to hit Save so that we've created that new library, and that takes me into that particular folder. So in that Blender Asset Library folder on my hard drive, there are no files. Now, I don't necessarily want to create multiple files in this. This is basically going to be a file cabinet to hold other files or other folders. So what I'm going to do is create another folder, and we're going to call this Shapes. And I will press Enter. And now I'm going to create another folder, and I'm going to call this, let's call this Furniture. And press Enter. And now this particular file that I want to save, I'm going to save it as a Shapes file. So we'll call it shapes.blend or shapeslibrary.blend. So I'm going to come over to the Shapes folder that I created, and I'm going to rename this from Untitled to shapeslibrary.blend, and I'm going to hit Save As, and now we've basically created a new file just for shapes. Pretty simple to do that, but there's also one more thing we have to do. We have to tell Blender where to go find all the library files that we create. To do that, we're going to go to the Edit menu, come down to Preferences. I'm going to drag my preference screen over to the middle here. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. So with that selected here, I've got my interface here, And now I've got to come down to file paths, and you can see I have no directories or no links to a directory or files that can be used as libraries just yet. We have to add those. To add those, it's as simple as clicking this little plus button. So I'll click that, and it'll bring open a file explorer or open window system. We're going to migrate to our small hard drive. I'm going to open up the folder for the Blender asset library, and I am going to hit shapes, and we're going to open that. Just double click it and then hit add asset to library. Okay, now I'm going to call this particular link, I'm going to call this link shapes. Now remember, this word here is just a link to this particular location on our hard drive, which is going to reference that file or that shapes library.blend file. Now we also have one that we want to create for furniture. I'm going to actually create that link right now, even though we don't have a file in it. So I'll hit the plus sign. I'm going to go back one. I'm going to click on my furniture, open that up, and I'm going to hit add asset library, which is basically creating a link to this folder. And that link to the folder for our purposes is going to be called furniture. And now I will come over to the save option just to make sure it's saved and save that. Now we can close our preferences. So here is our blank library that we've created. And I know it's our library because if you look at the top, it says shape library.blend. So this is going to be the Blender file where I put all of the shapes that I want to include in this library file, or all the shapes that I'll use as a library. If you don't understand it, don't worry. I'm going to explain it to you now. So I've got a cube here, and that, of course, is one of our shapes. So I'm actually going to open up my, or create a new window. And to create a new window in your 3D viewport, just move your mouse to the lower left corner. You'll see it changes to a plus sign. Click and hold the left mouse button and drag up. You can see it creates a brand new 3D viewport right here. That's not what we want. We want to change this viewport to something else. Now, if you're not familiar with Blender, you have options. You can come over here and change this window to be any one of these particular things. For instance, if I wanted a timeline, now I've got a video timeline for animations. If I want a compositor, I've got a compositor here. If I want an image editor, I've got my image editor here. What we want to do is come over and select Asset Browser. So now this is the Asset Browser system for our user interface. And you can see right now it's representing the current file, or whatever current file I'm working in, which is actually the Blender or the shapes library.blend. But I'm going to be more specific. I'm just going to make sure I've got shapes selected. So I've got that done, and I've referenced the shapes folder where my shapes Blender or my shapes library.blend file is located, and it's called shapes. And what we have here is a cube, and now I want to take this cube and I actually want to add it to my library within this Blender file. Again, I'm working in the library.blend file itself. I'm not working outside of that. So I'm going to come over here, and we know this is called a cube. We're going to leave it called a cube. I'm going to come over and right click on it, come down to mark as asset. And what this will do is it will change the little icon over here to a library icon, and it will add it to our library as whatever this name is, cube. That works pretty well. Now I'm going to take this cube and I'm going to move it. And now I'm going to come over and add in a new shape, and I'm going to add in a sphere. So add mesh. Come down to, let's say, UV sphere. I'm just going to leave that the way it is, and we'll leave it called a sphere. And again, I'm going to add this as an asset, so I'll mark it as an asset. And you can see now it's added the sphere to our assets. Okay, so let's take this and move it away because I don't need it anymore. And we're going to add in a couple more shapes. So Shift A, come over, add cone. There we go. We've got a cone, and I'm going to come over and hit right click on that and mark it as an asset. So now I've got 3 shapes in here, and just because I can, I'm going to add one more. So Shift A, and let's go and add in a Taurus. And just so I can show you something, I want to change the name of this. I don't want to leave it as a Taurus. I can come over here, double click it, and I can call it donut. So now I have this object on my viewport that's called donut. And I'm going to right click on it, come down to mark as asset, and now you can see I've got cone, cube, donut, and sphere. You can see that Blender automatically sorts these by alphabet, so everything is alphabetized here. You really can't sort these out, but you can filter them, and I'm going to show you in just a minute how we can filter them. Now remember, I'm actually working in the library file. I'm not working on a blank project or a new project. I'm working on only modifying my library.blend file. In this case, the shapes library.blend file. So I've got these particular shapes here. And I'm going to add in another cube, but we're going to change this to a rectangle. So I'm going to do Shift A, Mesh, Cube, and I'm going to size this along the Z-axis, about like that. Let's change the name to rectangle. And again, I'm going to add this to my library, mark as an asset, and there again, it puts it right there. And I'm just going to move it over, just so it's out of the way. Doesn't have to be, you don't have to move these in any particular order. However, if you are going to spend a lot of time making objects within your library file, you can select these, press the H key and hide them. I can come over here and do the same with those two, press the H key and hide. And then when I'm all done, I can press Alt H to bring them all back. Now, I'm going to come over and I'm going to save this. And if you noticed, I've made all these changes to my blend file, but I haven't saved it yet. So what I want to do is find my file menu, which I'll move that down, file, save, and now it's updated our shapes library.blend file denoted by the little pop-up here in the bottom of the screen. Okay, so that's all done. And now let's say I want to categorize them by making them just a little bit easier to work with. It's not difficult. I can come over here and you can see I have all, which would be all the objects in my library file or all the objects located in this Blender file, and unassigned. Unassigned means that they haven't been categorized yet. So now I want to make some categories. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to hit the plus sign there, and you can see it says catalog. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say cubes as one category. And now I'm going to go over and add in another one by pressing the plus sign. I'll double click the word catalog and type in spheres. And let's just say one more and we'll call this cones. Now you'll see these little stars here on the side of the words, and that denotes that we have not saved or made any changes to this file since we created these categories. Don't worry, we're going to get to that point. Let's come back to the all so that I've selected all the objects that are currently in my library project. And now I can drag some of these over. So the sphere I'm going to drag into the spheres. I'm going to take the cube and move that into cubes. I'll take the rectangle and I'll also move that into cubes. And we'll take the cone and we'll move that into cone. So if I come over to all, these are still all the objects in my system. If I click on the cubes, you can see there's only two objects that I've categorized as cubes. One as a sphere and one as a cone. And then as far as uncategorized objects, I still have the donut and it's not applied to any different category. I'm just going to expose all of them. And now to get rid of these little stars, what we have to do is basically update this file by saving it. I'll go to File, Save. It'll save the changes and you'll see the stars go away, meaning that our library file is written. Now, one thing to remember. When you're modifying your library files or the files that you're going to use as asset libraries, if I delete this object here, it's also going to delete it here. So for instance, I'm going to highlight this cone. I'm going to press the X key to delete it, and you'll see it has disappeared from our library or things that we can use in other projects. Again, if I select cones, it's gone. I'm going to press Control Z or Command Z, depending on what computer you're using. I'm just going to put that back because I don't want to do that. Just to make sure, I'm going to hit File, Save, and there we have it. We've created a library of shapes, which is pretty cool. Now, one more thing we can do while we're editing our library is if I want to create materials for this, I can create them here now, or I can come back and edit later. And basically what I'm going to do is show you how to come back and edit them later so that we know how to do that. Now, I also created a link to a library called Furniture. However, there is no Blender file associated with that particular library. To do that, I'm going to come over to the File and then press New, and then General, and create a brand new Blender file. And I'm going to save this Blender file, this blank Blender file, as my furniture library.blend asset library. So to do this, I've got this blank project here. I'll go to File, Save As. I'm going to migrate my way to that library directory. And you can see here's my Shapes folder and my Furniture folder. I'm going to go into Furniture, and we'll call this file Furniture Library.blend. And then I'll save that. And now I've created a library for furniture. Now I don't have any furniture, so we're going to actually go make a piece of furniture to work with. And I'll actually do two so that we have two objects in our furniture category. And all I'm doing right now is creating the library folders. So let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Just remember, right now I'm working with the library folders. What I want to do is turn this object into a table. So what I'm going to do is go to my viewport, and I'm going to look at this from the side. I'm going to bring this up so that it's on the Z-axis, right on the 0 location on the bottom. I'm going to right-click on that object, set. Let's see, what I want to do is set the origin to the 3D cursor. And that's working good for me. I'm going to press Tab. I'm going to grab, I'm going to use the face tool. I'm basically just doing a little bit of modeling here. I'm going to extrude, size that up. Extrude ZZ, and I'm going to bring that up, and now I've got this cool little table. It's, you know, whatever it looks like. It's not the prettiest little table, but we're going to leave it as a table, and I'm going to rename this from cube to table. Well, what I want to do now, because I'm working in my furniture library, is add this to the furniture library itself. To do that, we're going to do the exact same thing we did with our shapes. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to pull up the screen. I'm going to change this to the asset browser. I'm going to make sure that I'm working on the furniture library. And now I can come over here, select my table, right click on it, and add it or mark it as an asset. And there it is. It's located in our assets, just like so. Now I'm done with the table. I'm going to move that over, and I'm going to make a simple little chair. Very easy to make a chair. I will take a cube, Shift A. Let's see, we'll come over to cube, and what we want to do is make a new chair out of this, and I'm just going to keep this real simple, guys. I don't really care what the chair looks like. I'm just using it as reference. So I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to grab this particular face using the face tool right here. I'm going to extrude that along the y-axis, just like so. And then I'm going to grab this particular face. I'm going to extrude that on the z-axis. And just to make sure that I'm going straight up, just like so. I'm going to press Tab. And there is our rudimentary, very ugly chair, but we're just going to change the name to chair. And I will right-click on that, mark it as an asset. And now the chair is in our asset library. We have not saved it yet, so we'll go to File, and we will save. And remember, we're saving, or we're working in our furniture library.blend file. This is the file that we linked as a library file that we can use in other projects. Okay, so now that I've got that done, now I want to create a brand new project. To do that, I'm going to go to File, New, General, and I've created a brand new project. So in this particular project, I'm going to get rid of my cube because I don't need it, but I want to grab some of the assets that we used in our asset system, and what I can do is come over here, bring up my asset browser, and oops, let's get that in the right place. Asset browser. And now I want to bring in, let's say I want to bring in a piece of furniture. So I've got my asset library here, and it is my furniture library. I can come over and I can drag this table right into my viewport. There it is. How perfect is that? And now in my scene, I also want to add in a chair. And to do that, I can just drag in a chair, just like so. Now, the cool thing is, when I do that, I have several options here that when I link or bring in these objects from this particular, remember, these libraries or these objects are in a separate Blender file, and we're just linking to that Blender file. But I have several ways to bring those in. If I click this little down arrow, you can see I have link, append, and append by reusing data. So let me explain to you what these three things do. Link will actually take that same chair and link it to this file, which means anytime I make a change in my library file to that chair, it will change every other project or every other scene that I have a chair in automatically, which could work for you, could not work, because I like to have different types of furniture, so I may not want that. If I select Append, it will actually create another object of this chair with no linking to the original file. So it just brings in that object like we're importing it, and it links it to no other object within our scene. So no other object within our scene would have the same data or properties as that chair. And if we link by appending reuse data, for instance, if I grab this chair and I bring it over here and I rotate this along the z-axis, so now I've got a chair here, and I'm just going to bring this chair and move it over to the other side of the table. When I reuse the data, what that does is it actually keeps most of the data structures the same for both of these chairs as if they were just one chair. So for instance, if I come over here and I change the color of that chair by creating a new property for it, I'll make this red. You can see both objects are now red because they're sharing the same data structure. That may not be what you want, so just keep in mind with reuse data, they're going to share a lot of the data features, and just by appending that object, if I grab in another object here, I rotate that RZ and I rotate that on the Z-axis, you can see it does not share the same data as the original two. So for instance, by doing that, you can see when I change the color of this one chair, if I want to go to red, it changes both of them. If I change this particular one, I make that blue, and I'll just select blue here. You can see it's not changing it because they're all sharing the same data, which is not helpful to me because I do want this to change. And it's not changing. But that's how you would control your objects, by linking them in. For now, I'm just going to use reuse data, and I'll deal with it later. So that's how I work with that. Now, let's say I want to take an object from one of my other libraries and put it onto the tabletop. And I'm going to make this table brown, so I'm going to add in a new color. Let's make this brown just because we can. That looks good. I'm going to come over and I'm going to select my shapes library. And lo and behold, there's all our shapes. Let's come over to cones. There's our cone. And one cool feature is when I drag this cone over, you can see it puts a little grid on top of the table as to denote where it's going to place the object, which is kind of clever. And I'll put that right in the center. And now I've created this little decoration on the top of my desk. Now, I want to actually create some more materials in my shapes file or my shapes library file. So for instance, if I create a material here and I want to create a new material. So I'll come over to, I'm going to click off my scene. I'm going to delete everything here because we don't need it. I'm going to create a new material. We'll call this material brown. Again, I'm going to change the color to a brownish color, and you can see we're working on that table here. I can also take my material and add it to a library by right-clicking on it and then marking it as an asset. But remember, I'm not in an asset file. I'm actually working right now on my demo project. So I'm going to go and do a file, save as, and I'm just going to put this on my desktop, and we'll call this demo.blend. I already have one. We'll just overwrite it. So now let's say I want to add in some other things into my library. Now you can add just about anything you want. You can add characters, rigging, colors, materials, shapes, anything you want you can add to your asset library. As long as it can exist within a Blender file, it can be added as a library asset. So keep that in mind. Well, to do that, I can't do it from here. So I can't create this color and now add it to my materials here. I can mark it as an asset, but if I mark it as an asset, it's going to mark it as an asset on my particular current demo file, not on my library. So I need to add this brown color to my library. So how do I do that? Very simple. Let's edit our library file. So I'm actually going to add the materials. I'm going to add several materials to our shapes library. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to open that file again. So open recent, and we'll go down to shapes library.blend. I'm going to not save the demo file. And here you can see is our original shapes library.blend file where I added in all of these shapes. Let's create a new catalog or a new category called materials. And now materials has a little star next to it, which means we have not saved anything into it. Don't worry, we're going to do that in just a second. So if I want to create a new material for my asset library to use in other projects, while I'm editing my library file, I can come over to my materials. I can create a new material, and I'm going to call this matte wood color. And we'll change the color to brown, just like so. And now I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to mark it as an asset. And if I come over to all, you can see there it is. We've got this matte wood color marked as an asset in our library. We haven't saved it yet, so let's go and do a couple more. I'm going to hit plus. I'm going to create a new material, and we're going to call this matte green. And I'm going to change the color to dark green, just because I like dark green. And then we will make that an asset. And we click on here. You'll see matte green appears on our asset library tab sheet. And now I can take these two objects, you can highlight them, and just drag them into materials. And now I have two objects in my materials tab. And I'm going to actually create one more. We're going to come over here. We're going to hit the plus sign. I'm going to call this new, we'll double click it, matte red. For material red, I'm going to change the color, of course, to red. I'm going to darken that up just a little bit. And then we will right click on it, mark it as an asset, and go over to all. And I can take that and drop it into my materials catalog. So if I come over here, there's the three materials. Now I'll save my shapes library.blend file. And once it's saved, the star will go away. And now the colors, the materials, the objects are all in that one Blender file. And we're using that Blender file as our library assets holder. So let's go back to our demo file. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to open up my demo file. And here you can see we've got a table, which is brown. We've got a cone, which has no color. We've got two chairs that are red. I'm going to come down here and make sure that we've got our shapes selected as the library that we're currently using. I'm going to select the materials, and now I'm going to take this matte wood color. I'm going to drag that over the table. You see it changes the color of the table. Let's just change the cone. Oh, actually, we're going to change the color of the chairs to green. And because they are sharing the same data, both of them changed. And we'll make this little cone red. So there we go. That's how you would use materials in here. So that's simple. And then I can switch back and forth depending on what library I want to work with. If I want to bring in another table, I can select all here and just drag in another table. Actually, I'm going to append it without any data copying. So now I can make this table. If we go back to our shapes, select our green material, I'll make that table green. And there is our new demo project that I can save by itself, where we've been able to use our assets to bring in and apply materials to. Again, guys, you can do this with materials, shapes, anything you create, rigging, poses, any object in Blender can now be added to your library file. All you have to do is remember that your library files are Blender files that you are using as a library placeholder. So any changes you make or any add-ons that you want to make to a library file, you will have to go open up that library file and modify it or add to it. And I will show you one more time what I mean. If I come over here to, if I want to add a piece of furniture to my furniture library, I'm actually going to have to, I'm going to save this demo project. I'm going to open up my furniture library. You can go to File, Open, and go browse for it. If it's in your recents, just open up furniture library.blend. This is the library object that I have in that library file. And what I want to do now is I'm going to drag this table out of the way because we don't want it there. Let's grab this table. Let's move it out of the way. And I'm going to make a little lamp just so we have a little lamp here. And to do that, a simple little thing to do, I'm going to hit Shift A. I'm going to add in a circle. I'm going to press Tab, All, F. And now to make a lamp, this is pretty easy. Extrude, ZZ. I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to size that down. Extrude ZZ. I'm going to bring that up. Size that down. Extrude ZZ. Let's actually make that a little taller, just about like that. Extrude size. I'll bring that out a little bit. Extrude ZZ, and I'll bring that down. Then I'm going to size that. Then I'm going to extrude ZZ. We're going to bring that up. Extrude ZZ. We're going to bring it up again, just about like that. Size. Just about like so. And now I've got this basically a small shape of a lamp. And I want to take this, I'm going to name it lamp. I'm going to right click on it, mark it as an asset. So now I have this lamp in my furniture asset. Now it has not been saved. So I'm going to make sure that I come over to my file menu. I'm going to save this library. I'm actually working in the furniture library.blend file. I'm not working on a project. So to add an object to your library, you're either going to have to import it into this Blender file, or you are going to have to create it here. I'm going to save it. And now when I go back to my demo project, I can actually come over here. I can come back to my furniture library, and then I can drag the furniture or the piece of lamp onto the table. I can go back to my shapes library, and then I can make that lamp red, just like so. Pretty simple to do. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helps you with learning how to use the asset library system. Just remember, every library Blender file that you create, every Blender file that you're going to use as a library should be in its own folder, however you structure your folder system. And what I mean by that is if I come over to this Blender asset libraries, you can see I have furniture and shapes, and in those are just the files that hold the assets. And you can see it creates a text file with the categories as well as the Blender file. So for instance, if I wanted to add in a new library, I should create another folder and call it, let's say I wanted to call this cars. And then I can go and create a brand new Blender file library to become a cars library and just add cars to that, modify those however I want to use as a library. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Guys, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to my channel, as it does help my channel grow. I will be doing, over the next few days, I'll be doing some courses on how to use Blender 3.0. Hasn't changed much from Blender 2.9X, but we're going to get a little more into it. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.